Former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Dimeji Bankole, is the first to arrive on the second day of the screening of presidential aspirants under the ruling All Progressives Congress, APC. Shortly after, several other aspirants followed, including the Vice President, Professor Yemi Oshibajo. Done with the exercise, the Vice President throws some light into the interview process, dismissing a possible threat to his party following the emergence of former Vice President Alhaji Atiku Abubakar as the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, the PDP.
The screening went very well received. So we were able to discuss several issues of national and party concerns, and it went very well indeed. We had a very good chat.
What chances are there for the APC in this race, considering an article of a PDP candidate?
Well, of course, we're ahead of any party. Way ahead.
Some of the aspirants also speak on their experience during the screening process.
I think it's quite rigorous, and the checklist is very good, at least to be able to get to know the aspirants in totality and also get their idea of how they are going to run the affairs of the country so that we can further impact much more positively and take the country from the present level to the next level.
The chances is for also the APC to go to the north. You see, politics is about election. You have to look at the voting strengths. I'm sure very soon, when Nigerians believe in Nigeria, accept citizenship as the criteria for choosing anything, like the Constitution has already decided, that there's nothing like zoning.
However, others are concerned that the primary may be monetized.
A situation will come where you have no business to build a project or do any major project, because basically it is not a basis for your re-election or indeed an election in the first instance. What matters is accumulate cash and buy delegates. It's a horrible trend. Nigeria cannot lead Africa in that direction, and this has to change.
Also screened today is the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, Governor Kayode Fayemi of Ekiti State, Governor Yahaya Bello of Kogi State, President of the Senate, Senator Ahmed Lawan, former Minister of Science and Technology, Dr. Ogbonaya Onu, and businessman, Mr. Tain Jack Rich. Only one aspirant, Senator Rochas Okorocha, remains to be screened by the committee ahead of the party's presidential primary next week.
Well, yes, it was much later that Senator Rochas Okorocha also made it just in the nick of time. He beat the deadline, and there you go. Remember, he had some ordeal with the EFCC. The court at that time had he was granted bail. So, as you saw there, he made that deadline, and then he was screened. So they seem all ready for the next stage. He thinks that with the support, he will be able to scale through. They all think they will scale through. That's what always happens. So they have unique kind of faith.
Yeah.
They have political faith.
Yeah, we heard what Mark said the other time. Politicians are the most optimistic set of people in the universe. So, yeah. Anyway, the conversation is about to start.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to, of course, go back to Abuja. We've got a guest just sitting there. I know there's so many perspectives, so many questions. Many want to hear their response to all of what may be making the rounds. Who knows? Mark, where?
I'm not here.
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. Indeed, I have with me two fantastic people here in the studio. Mr. Adebayo Shitu is a former Minister of Communications. He's a member of the All Progressives Congress as well. And he is an elected delegate who's prepped already to vote in the upcoming APC convention for his presidential primaries. You're welcome, former Honorable Minister.
It's my pleasure to be here again.
And we also have with us Mr. Sani Umar, who is former spokesman of the Presidential Campaign Council of the People's Democratic Party. You're welcome as well.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, thank you.
It's another presidential season. I don't know.
Exactly.
Will you be joining the Presidential Campaign Council of the PDP?
Well, I don't know. They have to the cycle starts with a selection process in the party.
Okay.
So if the party selects me, I will of course be a part of it.
Okay. Okay, well, let us look at the issues at hand right now, because a lot of things have been said from as politicians like to say, they say an hour is like a lifetime in politics, and a lot can happen. The APC was busy conducting its presidential primaries. All of a sudden, we heard that the president was going to be meeting with APC governors. Before now, there had been speculation that the party might go the route of consensus. It's not yet clear. But immediately that meeting was called yesterday, it seemed rather clear that indeed it looks like consensus was going to be the route that the APC was going to go through. Even now, though, it's still not clear. But the message which the president sent to the governors was quite telling. I do not know if you've had a chance to read that statement. Have you, from our Honourable Minister?
I read the statement.
You did?
Yes, I read the statement.
What meaning did you get from it?
Well, the meaning I got from it is that the president, like every human being, would have his interests and preferences. And he tried to perhaps persuade, the governors to, perhaps allow him to make a choice, from among the aspirants.
Is that what he was saying?
Well, there are different reports, actually. Some reports...
Yeah, but it's one statement we all read.
Well, there were
Unless there were different kinds of statements.
There were two statements, but clearly he didn't mention any, specific person. But there was a report to the fact that since governors had always had the opportunity of, bringing in their preferred successors, there was that report, But I am happy that the president did not clearly try to impose any candidate, because, you see, I always say this, APC is said to be a progressive party. Progressive parties must not be afraid of primary elections. We must always ensure that a level playing field is provided for all aspirants from all over the country. That in itself has the capability or the potentiality of giving people a sense of belonging. Over the last 1 or 2 years, we've had challenges really about people thinking that some people are getting better advantages than others. And in our actions and in our statements, we must ensure that wrong impression or negative impression, is neutralized. So for me, I would appeal to Mr. President and appeal to our governors that they should, as Democrats, as progressives, ensure that a level playing field is provided for all candidates. Let delegates from the nooks and crannies of this country have an opportunity to make their choices. And then Nigerians will see that, we are doing better, than many other parties, as far as I'm concerned. So
I'd like to take some of the president's statement, some parts of his statement now, because he talks about how as he begins in number 5 of the statement, he says, as I begin the final year of my second term as president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and leader of the party, I recognize the compelling need for me to provide stronger leadership to the party under this transition process and to ensure that it happens in an orderly manner. He also talked about how in pursuit of the foregoing objectives, the party has successfully established internal policies that promote continuity and smooth succession plans, even at the state and local government levels. For example, first-term governors who have served credibly well have been encouraged to stand for re-election. Similarly, second-term governors have been accorded the privilege of promoting successors that are capable of driving their visions as well as the ideals of the party. he also talked about in number 10, I mean, that's reading from 5 to 7. Now, it looks like I'm reading Holy Scripture. We're not talking about verses. Looking at number 10 now, he says, in keeping with established internal policies of the party and as we approach the convention in a few days, therefore, I wish to solicit the reciprocity and support of the governors and other stakeholders in picking my successor, who would fly the flag of our party for election into the office of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in 2023. It hasn't quite said. I mean, he said he would like reciprocity. Does it say to you very clearly that I have allowed you pick your own successors, allow me pick mine? Is that what he's saying?
Well, that's the impression being created by that statement. But we just need to remind ourselves that we have had several states in the past where governors attempted to bring in their preferred candidates over and above what is equitable, and it has backfired. You know, so it's not a standard that we must, you know, try to build on. You know, we are a democratic party. We should, to the best of my own you know, knowledge and goodwill, I think that the fact that some governors have in the past imposed candidates cannot be a justification for us to continue to perpetuate that anti-democratic.
He didn't say impose. He said they were allowed to promote.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
people
I mean,
who are allowed,
everybody
who will drive their vision.
Yes, I mean, governors may have their preferences, but they should not, you know, bamboozle people. They should not intimidate. They should not do anything that will compromise the rights to fairness in, you know, bringing in new aspirants or candidates.
Okay. Yeah. Let me come to you, Mr. Sani. I'm sure that, maybe your party will be grateful for the fact that it didn't have to deal with this. I mean, oftentimes, looks like when you're at the center, it can be an advantage. It can also be a disadvantage. Certainly. But in this case, how did your party view the fact that you didn't have the president in your party? At least when it comes to this kind of situation, do you think that it's a major advantage or it's a disadvantage in terms of the process?
Well, I think it's an advantage to us at the moment. Not that we don't want to have the president, but as it is now, it has given us the opportunity to promote internal democracy, and which we have successfully done, even though the absence of a president has denied us the chance to have, you know, full delegates, both statutory and elected delegates. So if we had had a president, the president would have signed the law to have made it, you know, an act for us to now operate with both statutory, but even with the limitations of the delegates, I think.
Did you lose anything by that, by not having statutory delegates?
Yes, because the number of delegates will have increased and the competition will have also increased for getting the delegates. And so the money politics that was alleged to have been happening will have reduced, because the more the number, you know, it becomes very difficult for huge spending. You know, so because of the limited number of delegates, the clamor and the quest to get more delegates on the side, you know, have led to, you know, allegations of huge spending.
But the 2019 elections did not have this encumbrance. Still, there were allegations of huge spending, weren't there?
Which elections are you?
The 2019 elections.
Yes.
Your convention, which happened in Port Harcourt prior to the 2019 elections, did not have this encumbrance, where there were no statutory delegates.
But there was no huge spending. In Port Harcourt, most of the people who we were said to have even given delegates money was between $2,500 to $3,000. Now, the allegation is about $20,000, $30,000 per delegate. So the spending, this limit is higher now. Even though
because there are fewer delegates.
Yeah, there are fewer delegates, but the money given out is much more higher than the one in the totality of the Port Harcourt Convention.
You have that on authority?
Yes, I do. I was part of the process.
So are people complaining because they were left out of the bazaar?
Well, perhaps. I don't know whether it was a bazaar, but all I know is that the process was not as expected, because most people had been ready and they were sure that the number of delegates would have been higher. But they were disappointed when that omission by the National Assembly, came into play. And of course, you can't blame the president for not signing, because he has a window. The window is that he has within 30 days within which to sign the law. And of course, he has to scrutinize the law to ensure that the law is in complete compliance with his own dictates. Because the last time he signed that law, he discovered there was some encumbrances, and he begged the National Assembly to make some amendments, and they refused because they had already gotten what they wanted. And then they said he should go to court. So this time around, he has the right to look at it properly before he signs. So I'm not shifting blame to the president. What I'm saying is that we had already budgeted, we had already planned, all the delegates had campaigned along the line of both statutory and elective delegates.
Let me flip this to Lagos now, gentlemen and lady.
Well, yeah, Mr. Shitu, if I could ask you, when that part of the president's comment, which Mark Ware had also included, the president said, look, allow me to do certain things. He read out those policies, but it came across as though you didn't agree with those provisions which it was read out. But what if, having spoken to the governors, and the governors feel, okay, Mr. President, all right, we agree with you, come up with what your suggestion is, then the leadership of the party agrees with the president, and they choose, then get to the larger party, and then they ratify by way of consensus or something. Will that be acceptable? Do you think that will fly?
Well, I am a very loyal member of the party. Of course, I am educated enough to also be able to express independent views. If the president puts that through, through the governors, and it is accepted, certainly I will work, within that system to campaign for whoever, eventually emerges. But I want us to be warned that this year's election is not like the 2019 election. 2019 election was essentially a two-party affair. But this year, from what we are seeing, we are hearing of forces like third force, like, for instance, NNPP is coming up, Labour Party is coming up with a very strong candidate in, Peter Obi, and so on and so forth. So these, we must appreciate that actions would necessarily and naturally have consequences. I, as an individual, I'm just one person, and I have committed myself, to whatever the party comes up with. But we must also be, we must learn from our circumstances, we must learn from our environment, and know that it may not be as easy as we think, because, the society is, dynamic. We must also be warned now that the youths are coming up stronger and more agitated for change. If we just feel that because we have had the majority, I mean, it may not walk through in subsequent elections.
What do you mean by?
I just feel that we must be able to give the impression to the general public out there, and particularly the youths, that we are being fair to all aspirants, and that as Democrats, as progressives, we are not giving the impression that some people are being, over-pampered over and above all others.
Wow, it looks as if there's a lot more meaning into what you've just said. But so, what happens if, or why would there still be a lot of concern on your part if, because there are those who think, in the first place, you're the ruling party, your party is the ruling party. So whoever the party chooses, is it about the person, or equally about the kind of machinery and the support the party will deploy to support the person? So in that, given that kind of consideration, would it matter who the person is?
Well, as an individual, again, I would say this. I have great concern for the development of this country. I think our emphasis should be on merit rather than just, the wish of our leaders. Capability is very important. Merit is very important. Antecedents, in terms of what the individuals have been able to do in the past are very important. And then the potential that the person is bringing, on board, so that people will be confident that we are not going to waste 4 years, next 4 years, just because our leaders prefer one over and above another. So my concern is that we should give the most positive impression to the general public. I mean, I know that in our party we're about, on the register, we are about 40-something million. But from past elections, we've now had a time that we had more than 20-something million voters. The youths who were not qualified to vote in previous elections are now qualified. Many of them are now qualified, and many of them are also well educated, that they know that there's power in their ability to acquire their PVCs and to be able to vote. So we should not just take things lightly and think that whatever we decide will go down well with the electorate. And the electorate, when I talk of the electorate, they're all over the country.
Well, let me ask Mr. Umar this next question. It would seem that the dust hasn't quite settled on the selection of former Vice President Atiku Abubakar as presidential candidate of your party, the PDP. Those who are calling for they saw this coming because the national chairman of your party had favored the northern candidate over any other interest over time. Is that something that is giving the system any concern, or is just one of those noises?
Well, if you have been following the activities of the PDP, you will have discovered that even before the choice of the national chairman, there were a lot of ups and downs as regards to Prince Uche Secondos, who was the former national chairman of the party, whose matter is still in court over his removal from that position. Now, the coming in of the new chairman was also greeted with a lot of complaints, because most northern aspirants who wanted to contest saw it as a move to actually placate them from contesting the elections. However, with the horse trading and everything that went through, it was agreed that, one, that the national chairman will resign if the candidate comes from the north. And of course, the national chairman is now, the candidate is now from the north. So at what point will the national chairman resign? Is it at this stage, the process of electioneering, or is it after the elections that he will now resign? These are the issues now that is agitating the minds of our party faithfuls. However, it is not about the resignation of the national chairman. It is about the process that has brought in the new, because the party at 3 different levels. The Bala Mohammed report, Senator Bala Mohammed has said the presidency should be left open. The Uguanyi report has said it should be left open. And finally, the Autumn report also said it should be left open. So there is no any fast and quick rule as to what will happen. It is very clear that the presidency was left open and everybody contested, and Atiku Abubakar won the election. And so, having won the election, you cannot have, for instance, within our party, which is a normal practice, a candidate or a president and a party chieftain. But perhaps because he's a candidate, he may be allowed to, the chairman may be allowed to take him through to the elections. Then after the elections, he will be, asked to resign, so that a southern party chairman will come into play.
Well, we spoke with one of your party men yesterday who said that this is about the first time the PDP would throw open the candidature for the person to run as your party's flag bearer. Hitherto, it had been zoned to either one area or the other. The question here is, what informed the decision beyond the committee report? What reasons were those committees given for throwing it open as opposed to zoning, which was a historical practice of the PDP?
Well, let me state that the PDP had never had zoning in its own constitution until in 2017, when the Uche Secondos-led executives brought the issue of zoning to the National Convention, which was adopted, and it was part of the Constitution. In Section 7 of our PDP Constitution, that is where it gave room for zoning. Prior to that, there was no, it was a gentleman agreement, and this gentleman agreement has always been kept. Perhaps this time around, the power blocks from all sections of the country felt they needed to bring in their own different arguments as to why they should be the ones to take it. Why does the zoning, if there is any zoning, it should favor them. Where if there is no zoning, why they are the ones that are eminently qualified to contest the election. For the Southeast has brought an argument that they have been a sanctuary of the PDP. The PDP has always won in the Southeast, so they are, and they have never had it before, so it is their time to have it. The South have argued, for instance, that they only have done 5 years in the saddle, and so they needed to, up their ante and go further than that. The North Central has also argued that they have never had it as a democracy, and so they were also eminently qualified, and either to the Northeast. So the arguments have always been around this zoning is we have never had it, and now the matter has gone beyond the issue of zoning because there is also a tradition in the PDP. The tradition is that of the 16 years that the PDP had ruled the country, the North had only had it for 2 years during Eradua, and then the remaining periods were also done by Obasanjo and, of course, President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. So the North believes they have been shortchanged within the system, within the process, and so they were the ones that were eminently qualified. So that argument raged on, and some other dimensions were also brought in. For instance, there were arguments that the people who were coming back to contest had already left the party, and so by our constitution they were supposed to have lost seniority, and so they were not supposed to contest, they were not supposed to be given waivers, and so forth and so on. These arguments didn't succeed. So at the end of the day, the party decided, in greater consultation with stakeholders, that the ticket should be left open for every segment of the country to contest.
And apparently interest there will have been sacrificed. We'll look at interest where APC is concerned, and that's why I'm coming to you, Mr. Shitu. I'd like us to revisit the president's speech, paragraph 11 to be precise. And it says, I wish to assure you that the consultation process shall continue to ensure that all aspirants and stakeholders would be brought on board right through to the convention. This would also ensure that any anxiety occasioned by different factors are effectively brought under control and that our party emerges stronger. I'd like you to know what your reading of this is, particularly as it has to do with managing the interests that may emerge to be dissatisfied at the end of the day if what the president is saying is he wants to choose a successor, and as a result, it will be consensus.
Well, consensus, means consensus. Consensus implies that people are conceding. Consensus is different from imposition. Consensus is different from somebody recommending. If we really truly want to toe the path of consensus, then we could simply get all the aspirants into a room, lock them up, give them 1 or 2 hours to choose one among them for them to, bring out a consensus. That is what I know to be the true meaning of consensus. But from the practice of political parties in the past, I wonder, whether consensus has really been allowed to evolve, where, parties, people who are interested, within themselves or from among themselves decide to concede to one of them. Once there's no such altruistic, process of, some of the aspirants conceding to, one of them, then that cannot be consensus. So we have to be very careful as a party. I am saying all of these, out of, my true love for the party, true love for Nigeria, and the fact that I know that things are changing. A lot of paradigm is shifting here and there.
Let me come in there,
a lot
Mr.
more
Chieftain.
people are getting interested in how candidates, evolve or how they emerge. And, if we don't handle it properly, we might have a problem. Particularly now we have, I would concede, a strong candidate in the newly elected, PDP presidential candidate. So
let me ask a more specific question. If consultations will continue right through to the convention, does it mean that the consensus has emerged before the consultation, or does it mean that the consensus will emerge and only be unveiled at the convention?
One of the leaders who are consulting or who are being consulted. So I wouldn't know the processes and the procedures to arrive at a consensus candidate. My own is for now to analyze and, remind us that, we must not assume that things will just happen, and that whatever we do, the public, the larger, electorate will not react one way or the other. So my prayer at this stage is that we get it right as a party so that we don't miss, particularly, I have said, I'm trying to repeat again, the factor of NNPP is there. Kwankwaso is making, some moves, and, we cannot ignore him. Peter Obi is also a candidate that we must, learn from, or we must be warned about. Not to talk of the PDP, which I have said again, and I'm going to say again, has a very strong presidential candidate.
It appears as though your party, you're really worried.
Ensure that
pardon me to just jump in and ask you.
Tackle all of these presidential
You've
candidates.
expressed a lot of concern. You're worried about your party getting it right. It looks as if PDP is giving you a headache in terms of how and who they have elected to be their flag bearer. We'll hear from PDP soon. But what if your party end up not choosing, say, for instance, Bola Tinubu?
Well, I'm just one individual, I must say. If I have my choice as an individual, I will look for the best that can tackle the presidential candidates of other parties. We must not pretend that things will just be a walkover. We will be deceiving ourselves as a party if we think that because we are in office now, whatever we do would have no consequence, either positively or negatively. When you are going to a war, you have to assess the, power, the potentials of your enemy. You don't go to war in a blindfolded. So to my mind, let our party throw the battle open like PDP has done. If they are our opponents, but we can also learn from them, one way or the other. They threw it open. We should also do the same. Then at the end of the day, if one person emerges from whichever part of this country, all those who have not gotten it would have some satisfaction that they have tried, they have done their best. It is the majority who had their own preference. But all this issue of consensus from practice in the recent past, we don't use to get it right.
Won't that leave people feeling left out? Because you made that argument initially that people, it's a democracy, you should be participatory, etc., etc. But when a candidate eventually emerges through the process of a democratic process, so to speak, doesn't it leave people feeling left out?
Democracy would teach people, would let them know that, well, I have tried my best. The people, the electorate in this case, the delegates, decided to choose their preference. And so everybody will be satisfied because it's a democratic evolution.
If you look at what happened in the PDP, I mean, there is still plenty of talk and plenty of analysis as to what happened. A number of, well, I say, a certain region of the country does feel hard done by, and it would seem that the candidate of the PDP now has a job of work on his hand. I mean, the major thing he said is that he is a unifier, yes. And he's taken that as a primary assignment within his own party already. So don't you think that you run the risk of leaving many people feeling disenchanted if the results do not go their way?
No, you see, the situation will be worse if people feel that I would have won but for the fact that somebody didn't give me an opportunity. Once the process is evolutionary, I believe the job of Atiku Abubakar is reduced because there was no, deliberate scheme to impose him on the party. There was an open election. We all saw it, the whole country, the whole world saw it. And the votes were counted, delegates from all over had opportunity of, but once it is in position, once it is so-called consensus, then the delegates' role becomes almost irrelevant, because, it's a fait accompli imposed on them. And then people will get disenchanted. And in fact, it will not just be individuals then. It will be people, sectional, groups who feel disenchanted, who feel we have not been allowed to, maybe we've been put down, we've been tied down, we've been alienated and all of that, schemed out and all of that. But once the process is democratic, whoever wins will be acceptable to the largest majority of delegates and of the country itself.
Let me come to you, Mr. Umar. You talked about how your party is now. Is your party really considering asking the national chairman to resign?
Well, he actually made that pledge.
Okay.
When he was elected. He made the pledge himself. Nobody forced him to do it. He said he is aware of the enormity of the issues and that if a northern presidential candidate is elected, he would have no other option than to resign. Now, I have also said whether he will resign at this point or after the elections. That is what has not been actually defined. But the issue of him resigning, I think, is sacrosanct. The party must balance its own acts. The North and the South must be balanced. And that is how our party, if you take a look from Solomon La up to this moment, we have had a president from if we have a president from the North, then the chairman is from the South. That is how the party has gone.
Yeah, but looking at how, the conversation went within your party, the observations that have happened not just within your party, they've also happened outside of your party. Would you say that your party has taken into consideration the feeling of the general Nigeria, of the larger country? Because arguments on zoning were pretty strong, and your party does have zoning in its constitution, unlike the APC that doesn't have it in its own constitution. But beyond that, people say that it seems that there is a general understanding that when the North is done, it is now the turn of the South. Do you think that your party has considered that in terms of how the vote has swung with the candidacy of the PDP?
Our party cannot go outside our own constitution and begin to look for solutions nationally. We have a law guiding us as to how we should operate within our own party.
Yeah, but you have jettisoned zoning in your own constitution.
Yes, we jettisoned zoning because of the arguments I have given. I have given the arguments because the North is saying, no, you owe us. We have not done it. We only did 2 years, so we have not completed our period. Now the Southeast is saying, no, we have never done it before. The North Central is saying, we have never done it before. The Northeast is saying that, unless, of course, if you want to say Tafawa Balewa was democratically elected, which, of course, is parliamentary, we have not done it. So these various arguments, crystallize.
Yeah, but Tafawa Balewa was not in your party. This is talking about the generality.
Well, no, we are talking about the North.
Exactly, we're talking about the North in the entire history of Nigeria.
Yes.
If that is the situation, then we must also consider the tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari. You don't agree?
No, I don't agree, because President Muhammadu Buhari is of the APC. And the APC have their own constitution. And they are in their own constitution. They know how they have structured it, whether they have zoning or they don't have zoning in their own party.
But people argue that largely the reason why President Muhammadu Buhari won in 2015 and why an incumbent president lost was because the sentiments were pretty strong at the time that the North had not yet completed its tenure.
Yes, that is merely sentiments, but it does not still go beyond the confines of the interest and operations of a political party.
That's what I'm asking, if your party has also taken that larger consideration into, I mean, within the party, that sentiment did not hold sway, and the president, was elected as the candidate of the party, or was, whichever way he emerged as the candidate of the party. But when he was presented to the larger public, I mean, they decided whichever way they wanted. I mean, the sentiment, of course, came to play. So I'm asking whether your party has considered the larger sentiment of the bigger Nigeria before eventually saying that they would settle with Vice President Atiku Abubakar.
Okay, let me clarify an issue. Even where the sentiments at that time was for a northern candidate, the northern candidate could not have succeeded if there were no horse trading between the northern and the southern candidates. So without fusing the political parties, bringing a lot of interest groups together, and to realize that objective. And of course, within that process, there must have been horse trading as to, okay, we will support you, and then in turn, when you finish, you will support us. Perhaps that is what would have happened within the APC. Now, within our own party, all these things must have been considered, because there were 3 committees, don't forget, and they will have sampled the opinion of a larger spectrum of Nigerians. The Bala Mohammed Committee could not have sat down and written a report in isolation of consultation. The Ugwanyu Committee could not have sat down and written a report without consultations across the country. And of course, the Otom Committee could not have sat down, even though Otom himself is an advocate of a southern president. But he was the chairman of the panel. And the report is that the thing should be left open. So it must have been as a result of wider consultations.
Oh, well, I don't know. Zoning is not in your own arrangement.
No.
But still, the sentiments are there nonetheless. Do you think that your party, leaving it open, also has jeopardized the chances of whoever emerges? I mean, given the fact that now your party is thinking strongly of going down because the president made reference to an internal mechanism that has been put in place within the party, and he's really concerned about giving it strong leadership. Do you think that it jeopardizes, I don't know the right word I'm looking for now, but the chances of fairness within the party?
Well, let me say this as a reminder to all Nigerians. When Buhari was chosen within APC in 2015, it was not because he came from the north. It was not because he's a Hausa man. It was not because he comes from Daura, but because on merit he was the one who merited being chosen. And he has done well within the last 7 years. By the grace of God, he has become a father of the nation. And we expect that by the grace of God, through the same process that he emerged, in 2015, we will have the emergence of another presidential candidate. So the issue that must be emphasized, let us use the same standards of merit, of integrity, of nationalistic disposition, to provide a level playing field for current aspirants. Even in 2015, Buhari was not the only presidential aspirant. Kwankwaso was there, even Atiku was in the APC then. They all, competed. And then, the best of them, was elected. That is President Muhammad Buhari. So I am pleading, really, that we should allow the same yardstick of competition across the country, to prevail in choosing our presidential candidate so that we will have the best as judged by the generality of our party members from across the country. And then I believe if we do that, we will succeed. The fact that we unilaterally, if I may use the word, quote and unquote, choose somebody does not guarantee anything. Because this is a new Nigeria that we are in. And like I have said, new electorate are daily, being added to what we had, in the past.
The days ahead will certainly be interesting to see how the electorate finally welcomes the eventual candidates from your party and how they're welcoming the candidates from your party who has already emerged in the person of former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. But gentlemen, thank you so much for your analysis this morning. Mr. Adebayo Shitu is former Minister of Communications and member of the APC. Thank you so much for coming on. And Mr. Sani Umar is a former spokesperson, Presidential Campaign Council of the People's Democratic Party. Thank you also for coming on as well.
Thank you, Marty. We
take a break at this point, but there are internal rumblings in certain parts of the PDP in some states. We'll be delving into one of the controversies after this break. Please stay with us.